At Christmas, my son raised his glass and turned me into a headline. 10,000 a month, Nathan said, the way politicians say hope, and the room of Dallas suits answered with applause that felt like hail against glass. I stood there in a borrowed suit whose sleeves swallowed my wrists and a collar that pinched the soft part of my throat. I had pressed the jacket earlier with the bottom of a frying pan because the iron in my building only did heat in theory. The chandeliers above me threw diamonds on marble, and men laughed like their lungs had never known cold. 10,000 a month. I thought about the heater in my Ford coughing out breaths that had no warmth in them. I thought about can beans and fluorescent lights and the way a mop handle raises a ridge in your palm if you hold it for 4 hours straight. I thought about the thin white envelope from the electric company that waited on my table like a dare. But in here, 10,000 lived on Nathan's tongue and turned me into a monument to his goodness. Clara, his wife, touched the stem of her glass with 2 fingers and let a smile grow like frost. Her gown was the kind that remembers its own price. Her hair didn't move when she turned to measure me. It wasn't pride in that look, or even contempt. It was inventory. She was counting on my silence the way you count on a door to stay where you left it. Before we continue, if you're listening, tap subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. This part matters. Nathan's arm came down heavy on my shoulder. For the cameras, my father made sacrifices, he said. I make sure he lives in comfort. Laughter. Clinking. A man with a wristwatch the size of a biscuit leaned in to say, "You're a lucky dad." I nodded because nodding is easy when your tongue has nowhere to go. My name is Edward Hayes. 58 years. I've watched the world make more sense on paper than in the mouth. Tonight, nothing made sense anywhere. Are you all right, Edward? Clara's voice reached me the way perfume does, pleasant first, then hard to breathe, and she'd moved to my side without creasing her smile. You look a touch overwhelmed. The champagne can do that. I don't drink, I said. Of course, she said as if I'd agreed with her. Nathan worries about you. He does so much. Sometimes I tell him it's too much. Her hand found my sleeve and patted the borrowed wool the way you pat a dog that isn't yours. Be grateful, she added so softly I almost filed it under background noise. Grateful. The word landed somewhere between my ribs and stayed there. I excused myself before the grateful in me turned into something the room would call a scene. My shoes were loud on the stone, but the party swallowed the sound. I stepped onto the terrace and let December make a home in my lungs. Dallas lay ahead of me in hard angles and blinking points, 1,000 windows pretending to hold 1,000 different kinds of happiness. My phone buzzed. The electric company again. The number due was smaller than the number my son had just given to the air. I read it twice, as if the digits might change if I looked kinder. Behind me, the door sighed and let her through. Edward, Clara said, a silhouette cut out of light. You left so suddenly. I was worried. She moved closer, not quite near enough to share the cold. You should pace yourself. Busy nights can be a lot. I'm fine, I said, and I'm curious, does generosity always need a microphone? Her smile didn't move. What a poetic question. Nathan just wants people to know that family matters. Family, I said, then I should say it plainly. I haven't seen a penny of those 10,000 a month, not one. For a breath, her eyes forgot to be warm. There it was. A flicker, a calculation, a coin tossed in the air that didn't quite come down. Edward, she said, lowering her voice into something gentler, you may not be aware of how Nathan structures things. There are trusts and instruments, accounts you don't see directly. It's for your benefit. It's efficient. I balance every receipt because I have to, I said. If money comes to me, I know it, and I know nothing has. Memory is funny as we age, she offered, the way someone offers a mint. Let Nathan carry this. He's good at carrying. I stood very still so the anger could pass without leaving a dent. Thank you for your concern, I said, and tasted metal. She let me go with a smile that didn't quite fit the shape of my name. Shall we go back in? The dessert course makes donors very generous. Inside, the room had softened into the expensive kind of ease. The men were telling longer stories, and the women were laughing at parts that weren't funny. Nathan was in a circle of heads, his hands drawing boxes in the air the way winners diagram their victories. I paused at the edge and watched him. There are rooms you enter as a father and rooms you enter as a witness. It is a particular kind of grief when you realize you are in the second room and nobody told you when it happened. A server threaded past with a tray of cakes. I took one so I'd have something to do with my hands. The frosting was perfect. I could taste the refrigerator. It came out of more than the sugar. Mr. Hayes, a man said, stepping into my small orbit, your boy is a force. He's doing a lot of good things. You should be proud. I am something, I said, and let it be the truth. My coat waited on a gilt chair near the gift table, where envelopes sat in a silver bowl like obedient birds. I reached for the coat and knocked one of the envelopes loose. It skittered to the floor and turned a corner. I bent slower than I remembered and picked it up. The paper was thick, the color of cream after someone has already decided not to add more. A woman's compact lay open on the table edge, its mirror catching a fragment of my own uncertain face. I closed it and set it aside. The envelope was unsealed. My fingers registered that before my mind did. I didn't mean to look, I meant to put it back with the flock, but when I slid it toward the bowl, the flap opened like a mouth and I saw the corner of a check the way you see the tip of a knife before you know you're in a kitchen. Pay to the order of. The letters were clean even in a glance. C. Morgan 10,000/$100. The memo line read, support. I didn't read it twice, I didn't have to. The name C. Morgan lived in the small file drawer in my head marked with things Clara said the night she married my son. Her father had introduced her as our Clara Morgan, now a haze by love, and the men had laughed because love sounds better with an index fund. The room did a slow pivot around me and then found level again. I slid the check back into the envelope and the envelope back into the bowl. I stood up and straightened a coat that was never mine to begin with. Everything all right, Dad? Nathan was there suddenly, broad and warm and public. His hand found my shoulder in an old reflex that used to feel like safety. You disappeared. Clara said you needed some air. I did, I said, and listened to what the words did in my mouth. It's colder than I expected. Texas does that, he said with the tone of a man who has just invented weather. Listen. Thank you for being here, it means a lot to me. I looked at him the way you look at photographs of people you love. It's all there, but none of it moves. How much of what you just said in there is true? I asked. His smile tightened one notch. We'll talk later, not tonight. Later, I repeated, before or after the 10,000 finds its way to me. He blinked. A man across the room called his name like a rope. We'll talk. Nathan said again, don't make this a thing. I'm not, I said, it already is one. Clara appeared at his side as if the architecture required her to be part of the frame. Edward, she said brightly, we're doing the final photos. Come, stand with us. I looked at the photographer, at the guests assembling into an idea of family. The lens lifted up like a small dark moon that could make tides if it wanted to. I stepped in because I have learned there are moments when you refuse and moments when you collect the proof that you were there. The flash popped twice. The room cheered once. The night decided it had said enough. I left before the valet could mangle my name and walked the extra block to where my Ford pretends not to be ashamed of itself. The seat was cold through my coat. I put my hands on the wheel and didn't turn the key. I just sat and let the party's noise leak out of my bones. The check in a bowl that wasn't mine, an old name sewn into a new life. 10,000. On the passenger seat, the electric bill waited where I'd left it so I wouldn't forget to be afraid of it tomorrow. I slid it under the visor and laughed once, a small, surprised sound that didn't know what it wanted to be. My phone lit. The screen showed a message from an unknown number. You should be grateful, Edward. It's unwise to complain about gifts. No signature. I didn't need one. I could hear the smile in the sentence and the click of heels behind it. I turned the key. The engine shuddered into a kind of consent. The windshield held my reflection for a moment before the night reclaimed it. Back at the apartment, I hung the borrowed suit on the back of a chair and watched it try to look like it belonged. My table waited with a stack of bills and a pen that always writes lean. The radiator stuttered on and off like it couldn't decide who it wanted to be in this life. I rinsed a cup and filled it with tap water and told myself I would sleep, but when I turned to set the cup down, something caught on the fabric of the coat, a tiny snag, a thread I hadn't noticed before. I tugged gently and an ivory card slid out from the inside pocket. I hadn't borrowed it, it had borrowed me. A calling card monogrammed in a serif that people pay others to choose CM. I turned it over and the back held a single line in clean black ink. Delivery confirmation, December 24th, $10,000. My hands didn't shake. They learned a long time ago that shaking wastes warmth, but in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief, it was the moment you hear a door unlock inside a house you thought was empty. Out on the street, a bus sighed and moved on. Somebody upstairs dragged a chair across the floor. The radiator found its rhythm. I set the card beside the electric bill and sat down slowly, carefully, like a man about to lift something heavy that finally has a handle. Clara's smile in that ballroom had been made to endure. Anything could hit it and it would keep its shape. But when my eyes met hers as I slid that envelope back into the silver bowl, just for a second the smile forgot its job and her face froze. That was the first true thing I'd seen all night. I woke before dawn, not because of an alarm, but because the lie from last night was still loud in my head. The card with Clara's initials sat beside the electric bill on the table like two witnesses who refused to leave. I boiled coffee in a dented pot, bitter and black, and drank it standing up. My chest carried a strange weight, not fatigue, not even shame anymore. Something harder. Something I hadn't felt in years. When I pulled on my work vest, polyester that always smelled faintly of detergent, I felt like two different men sewn into one body. The one who scrubbed warehouses until the bones hummed, and the one who had seen a $10,000 check written to the wrong name. The grocery store swallowed me the way it always did. The beep of scanners, the clatter of pallets, the squeak of shrink wrap. Habit is the strongest chain a man can wear. I lifted, sliced, stacked. My hands worked, but my mind wouldn't stop pacing. Janet, a coworker with red-rimmed reading glasses and the kind of sharp kindness that notices more than you want noticed, handed me a box cutter I'd left on the floor. "Long night?" she asked. I almost said yes. Instead I asked, "Tell me, Janet, if someone says they give you money every month and you never see a dime, what would you call that?" She frowned, the kind of frown that meant she was sorting numbers in her head. "Fraud. Theft, maybe both. Especially if they claim it in public." "Why?" "No reason," I said, but her eyes told me she didn't believe that. That word, fraud, clung to me like bleach on skin. Fraud isn't just betrayal. Fraud is something the law knows how to spell. At noon I drove to the library instead of home. The librarian, a woman who had once taught me how to print a form when I fumbled at the computer, nodded as if she already knew I had come for something heavier than books. The computer screen glowed cold. I typed, "Elder financial abuse in Texas. Claiming dependent support without payment. False trust accounts." The answers came back sharp and clean, the kind of clarity that cuts. If a person claimed a parent as a dependent, they must provide more than half the support. If they filed papers without actually giving the money, it was fraud. If the parent was over a certain age, it could be abuse. There were numbers to call. Places to go. I copied everything into my notebook. The word allowance stared at me from the top of the page. Underneath I wrote, "What really happened?" Then the details spilled out. The check, the initials, Clara's voice on the terrace whispering, "Be grateful," Nathan's hand heavy on my shoulder. By the time I put the pen down, the page was full, and my silence wasn't silence anymore. It was evidence. I told myself I wouldn't go near Nathan's house again. That was a promise I broke the very next morning. The neighborhood gates opened when I pressed the button. My Ford rattled against manicured hedges that looked like they had never known rain. Maria, no, not Maria, Elena, opened the door before I knocked. She had worked for them for years, her apron crisp, her eyes kind in the way only tired people can be kind. "Mr. Hayes," she said, surprised. "Is everything all right?" I put on a worried face instead of the truth. "Nathan seemed tired last night. He didn't answer my call this morning. I thought I'd wait in his office just in case he came home between meetings. A father worries." She hesitated, then nodded. "Mrs. Clara is at her class. Mr. Nathan is downtown. But if you want to wait, I'll bring tea." I thanked her and walked into a room that smelled of leather and victory. Nathan's office. A desk too heavy for its legs. Papers in a neat disorder that looked intentional. The checkbook lay open. I didn't mean to touch it, but I did. Every month the same amount. 10,000. Not to me. To Seth Morgan. Clara's name before she wrapped herself in haze. A manila folder nearby whispered another story. Texas. An accountant's letter praising Nathan for providing $120,000 a year in support for his father. A trust, Care, my initials. A trust one had never heard of, never touched, never received a penny from. I photographed everything with a shaking phone that, strangely, didn't shake. Each page went back exactly as I'd found it. When I closed the folder, the desk looked untouched. My heart didn't. A buzz. A message from Elena. "Mrs. Clara just called. She's coming home early. 5 minutes." I wiped my fingerprints off the desk with the sleeve of my borrowed coat and sat by the window with tea in my hands. The steam rose like it didn't know it was hiding a theft. Minutes later, the front door opened. Nathan appeared first, his voice soft and practiced. "Dad, are you okay?" Maria said, "Elena said you were here." I hugged him the way fathers do, but I wanted to ask him about the trust, the checks, the lies. Instead, I asked something stranger. "Are you happy, Nathan?" He blinked, thrown off balance. "I don't know. There's always more to chase. Clara expects a lot." The front door opened again and Clara's voice entered the room before she did. Smooth, polished, rehearsed. "Edward, what a surprise. Are you feeling better?" I stood, coat already in my hand. "I was worried about Nathan. That's all." She slid behind his chair, hands resting on his shoulders like a claim. "He takes good care of you. You don't need to trouble yourself with details. Details decide if I can pay rent," I said, my face calm. Her smile cooled. "Trust the people who love you. Rest. Don't dig into things you don't understand." Nathan walked me to the door, his hand heavy again on my shoulder. "Call me if you need anything." The line was rehearsed. The weight of it wasn't. Outside, Elena's eyes met mine for half a second. "Quick. Worried." She opened her mouth, then closed it. But as I stepped out, she pressed a folded paper into my hand. I didn't look at it until I was 3 blocks away, parked under a tree that had shed its last leaves. The paper was a copy of an envelope. The return address was Nathan's office. The addressee, C. Morgan. My hand shook then, not from fear but from the raw relief of knowing I wasn't crazy. In the quiet of the car, I whispered to myself words I hadn't used in years. This is fraud. And fraud means the silence is broken. The night after Clara pressed her perfect smile into my silence, I sat at my kitchen table with the folded paper Elena had slipped into my hand. The copy of that envelope stared at me until the letters blurred. It's Morgan. My son's wife collecting what the world believed was mine. The walls of my apartment seemed thinner than usual, the neighbor's TV bleeding through, the radiator coughing in bursts. I pulled my notebook closer and wrote in block letters across the top. Fraud. The was. Underneath, I listed every detail I had seen, dates, check amounts, the trust name that never existed. Writing it down made the truth heavier but also steadier. By morning, my mind was already building steps out of the fog. Steps needed allies. At the grocery store, I found Janet in the break room, her red glasses perched low as she worked through a crossword. I slid the envelope copy across the table. She read it once, then again, slower. This isn't support, she said. This is rerouting. Your name should be there, but it isn't. Her eyes narrowed. Edward, this looks like fraud. And if you're over 50, she stopped herself, adjusting her glasses. It could fall under elder abuse. You need someone who knows numbers inside and out. I only know debts and bills, I said. Then let me help, she answered, no hesitation in her voice. That kind of kindness doesn't sound like charity when it's spoken by someone who's been poor long enough to know the shape of hunger. I hadn't spoken to David in 20 years. Once, we had carried steel beams together on a construction site until our backs felt carved from stone. He had traded his hard hat for law school, and last I'd heard, he was good with words in rooms where men like me only mopped the floors. I called. His voice on the other end was older, roughened, but alive. Edward Hayes, he said with a low laugh. I was just telling someone about the old days. What's got you calling me out of the blue? I need help, David. Not the kind that waits. Something in my tone made him quiet. Then, where are you? Let's meet. We sat in a coffee shop that smelled like almonds and burnt espresso. I showed him the photos I had taken in Nathan's office, the checks, the trust, the accountant's letter. I slid the copy of Elena's envelope across the table. David scrolled slowly, his lawyer's eyes catching every line. When he finished, he looked at me the way a man looks at a bridge he's about to cross. You already know what I'm going to say, he said. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud. Maybe tax fraud. Maybe abuse. Maybe both. We'll need records, witnesses, and patience. But Edward, this could tear Nathan's world apart. I swallowed hard. Then let's start tearing. That night, I drove back to Nathan's neighborhood and parked a block away. I didn't go to the door. I waited until I saw Clara's car pull out for one of her endless classes. Then I walked to the side gate where Elena emptied trash into bins lined in perfect rows. She startled when she saw me. Mr. Hayes, you shouldn't be here. I know, I said. But I need to know what you've seen. She looked over her shoulder, lowered her voice. I've seen the checks. Every month. Always to her name. Never to yours. I told myself it wasn't my business, but it isn't right. Would you speak if asked? I asked quietly. Her lips pressed tight. Fear lived in her eyes, but so did decency. If it came to that, yes. I'll tell the truth. She reached into her apron and handed me another folded paper. I made a copy once. I don't know why. Maybe I knew it would matter. I tucked it into my coat. You've done more than enough. Thank you. She shook her head. No. You deserve better than this. 2 nights later, the call came from a voice I didn't know. A young man, careful, tired. My name is Joshua. I used to work in Nathan's office. I think I have something you should see. We met at a small diner off the highway, the kind where the coffee never stops burning and the vinyl seats carry old secrets. Joshua was younger than I expected, his tie loose, his folder too heavy for its size. I quit, he said, pushing the folder toward me. They asked me to shift numbers. Move money through accounts that didn't belong to you but carried your initials. I kept copies. Emails. Ledgers. I couldn't sleep knowing what they were doing. I opened the folder. Emails referencing dependent support alignment, instructions for routing payments through C. Morgan, spreadsheets with my name scribbled in margins but never tied to a bank account I owned. I felt something rise in me then, not just anger but confirmation. Proof. Why help me? I asked. Joshua's eyes lowered. Because my grandmother raised me. She cleaned houses her whole life. If someone had done this to her, I'd want someone to fight for her. I left the diner with the folder under my arm, the papers whispering louder than Nathan's toast had ever shouted. In the quiet of my car, I spread them across the seat and let my fingers rest on them one by one. Elena's copies, Janet's certainty, David's plan, Joshua's courage. For years I had been alone in silence. Now the silence had cracks. And through those cracks, allies had stepped in, carrying the weight I thought only I could carry. The lie had lived in the ballroom. But the truth was gathering here, in shadows, waiting for its turn on the stage. Morning came with the gray kind of light that makes everything look undecided. My apartment was cold, the radiator groaning against the winter. On the table lay the pieces I had gathered, Elena's envelope copy, Joshua's folder of emails, the photos from Nathan's office. Proof. Paper that spoke louder than any toast under chandeliers. I poured bitter coffee into a chipped mug and stared at those pages until the steam disappeared. I had spent months letting Nathan tell the world a lie with my name stitched into it. Now I carried something heavier than humiliation. I carried leverage. I bought a small digital recorder the day before. Nothing fancy, just a key fob-sized device that slid easily into my pocket. Texas law said one party on the line was enough for a recording, and I intended to be that party. I dialed Nathan. He picked up on the fourth ring, his voice sharp. "Dad, I'm in the middle of something. Can this wait?" "It can't," I said. My thumb pressed the recorder's button. "At the party you told everyone you give me $10,000 a month. I've never seen a dollar. Where does it go?" Silence. A breath. Then his voice shifted into the smooth tone he saved for investors. "Finances are complicated. I've structured things long-term. You wouldn't understand." "What structure?" "Trust. Consolidations. Investments. You're taken care of." "No, Nathan," I said quietly. "I'm not. I'm counting quarters for laundry while you claim I'm worth $10,000 a month. If there's a trust with my name on it, show me. If there are payments, tell me who cashes them." His voice hardened. "You sound ungrateful. After everything I've done." "I'm not ungrateful," I cut in. "I'm asking where the money is." "Maybe you should talk to someone about memory," he snapped. "Confusion happens at your age. Don't embarrass yourself." The sentence landed like a fist, but the recorder caught every word. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet and replayed it. His voice came back tinny but clear. Confusion. Memory. Ungrateful. Words I knew he would regret. That afternoon, I met David Rowe in his office, the folder spread across his desk like a map of betrayal. He listened to the recording, his lawyer's jaw tightening. "This is exactly what we need," he said. "A pattern. Paper, witnesses, and now his own words. We won't move yet. We build until they can't wiggle free. But Edward, you have to be steady. No shouting, no threats. Steadiness reads as truth in court." I nodded, though the fire in my chest wanted storm instead of calm. That night I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I wrote as if to one person who might listen all the way through. My son stood in a ballroom and told the world he gives me $10,000 a month. I drive a Ford with a broken heater. I eat canned beans for dinner. I've never received a penny. I wrote about the electric bill, about Clara's whisper on the terrace, about being turned into a prop for someone else's story. I ended with a question. If your child claims to give you money you never see, and the world applauds him for it, what do you do next? I posted it under a new account. No names, no direct accusations. Just the truth. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. By morning, the post had traveled farther than I had in months. Dozens of messages. Then hundreds. Strangers wrote of their own stories. Parents claimed as dependents while left penniless, families polished on paper while rotting in real life. "You are not alone," one wrote. "Keep records," another said. "I believe you," came again and again. I replied to as many as I could, each word like a stone added to a foundation I hadn't realized I was building. By evening, a local page shared the story. A reporter emailed, polite but curious. I didn't answer, not yet. I needed more than voices. I needed proof that breathed outside my apartment walls. Near dusk, my phone rang. "Nathan." "Dad," his voice tight. "Are you posting nonsense online? People are connecting dots. You're damaging my business. You'll embarrass me and Clara." The recorder clicked alive in my pocket. "I won't be embarrassed for telling the truth about my life," I said. "If your business depends on a lie about me, that's your problem." His voice dropped. "If you keep this up, I'll talk to someone about your capacity. Don't force me." Capacity. Not memory this time. Capacity. A word sharp enough to cut a man out of his own life. I breathed slow. I am entirely capable. And I am done being your cover. The line went dead. But I had his threat caught in digital teeth. I stepped outside into the night, the cold air wrapping around me like armor. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying silence. I was carrying weapons. The first strike had landed. And it hadn't come from rage. It had come from truth. The morning after Nathan threatened to strip me of capacity, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open and the recorder beside it. The log sheets Patricia had given me were filling fast. Dates, times, exact words. Words like confusion and capacity. Words that courts would recognize as weapons when spoken against an older man. I poured myself bitter coffee strong enough to burn the tongue and read through the entries aloud. Every line made the same picture. Nathan and Clara had built a paper palace, using my name as their cornerstone, while I lived among overdue bills. By midday, I returned to that neighborhood of perfect hedges and gates that opened like obedient servants. I didn't go to the front door. I waited at the corner until Clara's car disappeared, the tinted windows hiding her face. Then I slipped through the side gate where Elena emptied the bins. Her hands trembled as she set a bag down. "Mr. Hayes, you shouldn't come here. It's dangerous." "I won't stay long," I said. "But I need to know, what you've seen, is it more than checks?" Her eyes darted toward the house, then back to me. Every month, envelopes. Always the same amount. Always in her maiden name. Sometimes smaller checks to something called CH Investments. She thinks no one notices, but I do. I keep track. Housekeepers always keep track. She pressed another folded paper into my palm. A copy I made weeks ago. I couldn't throw it away. I tucked it into my coat. "If this goes to court, you won't stand alone." Her face softened. "Then maybe I'll tell the truth when it matters." That evening, I met Joshua again in the diner where the coffee never stopped boiling. He slid more pages across the table. Emails, ledger notes, directives from Nathan. "They told us to mark payments as parental support," he whispered. "But the transfers went to shell accounts. St. Holdings. CH Investments. Clara's initials everywhere. Your initials too, but never to you." "Why now?" I asked. Joshua's voice cracked. "Because lies don't sleep. I haven't slept in months. I want my grandmother to be proud of me. And I want them exposed." The papers glowed under the neon lights, damning as fire. David spread all the documents across his desk, his lawyer's pen tapping slow. "This is no longer just a family lie. This is systemic fraud. Checks to Clara, shell companies, trust accounts that never existed. We'll prepare preservation notices, banks, accountants, the office. They won't be able to destroy records once they know we're watching." His eyes met mine. "But they'll try something else. They'll isolate you, claim you're unstable, maybe even push for guardianship. You need to stay calm. Calm builds credibility. Rage destroys it." I nodded, though rage was the only warmth I had left. 2 days later, my anonymous post began to spread beyond small circles. Local news pages picked it up, quoting pieces of my story without names. "A father erased from his son's success," one headline read. Strangers flooded the comments. "My son claimed me as a dependent and pocketed the refund. My daughter-in-law said she handled the bills, and I ended up homeless. This story is mine too. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. The truth was in the air and people were listening." One evening as I left the grocery store, Clara's car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down and her face, lit by dashboard light, looked carved from porcelain. "You're making mistakes, Edward," she said. "Public mistakes. You don't understand the damage you're doing to Nathan, to yourself." "I understand enough," I said. Her voice dropped. "If you keep this up, you won't just lose him. You'll lose everything." "I already have nothing," I answered. "That makes me dangerous, doesn't it?" For the first time, her smile wavered. That night, I returned to the library. I searched public records until the computer's fan hummed like a warning. St. Holdings. CH Investments. Both traced back to addresses tied to Nathan's office. Both had purchased properties, a downtown condo, a ranch outside Dallas. All in cash. I printed the pages, the paper warm in my hands. Fraud leaves footprints when pride grows careless. I added them to the folder, heavier now than the borrowed suit I had worn to the ballroom. The unraveling. The next morning David called. "The accountant's letter you photographed, I tracked the firm. If we can get testimony that Nathan directed the language, we have enough for tax fraud and elder financial abuse. It's not just a family matter anymore. It's criminal." I closed my notebook, steadying my hand. For the first time, the lie felt smaller than the truth. Nathan and Clara had built a web, but every thread now led back to them. And I wasn't caught in it anymore. I was holding the scissors. The winter sun rose thin and pale, a light that didn't promise warmth. On my kitchen table lay the folder I had built piece by piece. Elena's copies of envelopes, Joshua's emails, David's legal notes, Patricia's log sheets, and the printouts of shell companies buying condos in cash. What had once been humiliation was now evidence. What had once been silence was now strategy. For years, I had lived like a ghost in my own family's story. Now the pages in front of me said otherwise. They said you were never invisible. They just counted on you never speaking. Patricia looked over the latest documents with eyes that had seen too many families poisoned by greed. This is enough, she said, steady and sure. We'll file with the district attorney and the tax office the same day. They won't have time to shred or hide. David sat beside her, flipping through Joshua's emails. This isn't just support fraud. It's systemic. Shell accounts, forged trust names, redirected checks. It could bring charges of tax evasion, elder financial abuse, conspiracy. It's big. I exhaled, not relief but resolve. Then let's make it bigger. Let's make it undeniable. Patricia tapped the table. First we get sworn statements. Elena will testify about the checks. Joshua already gave us his documents. If the accountant confirms, we have a pattern no judge can ignore. Will you be ready, Edward? She asked. I nodded. I've been ready since the night he put his hand on my shoulder in that ballroom. 2 nights later, the story I had posted anonymously reached further than I'd imagined. Local news gave way to state coverage. Reporters camped outside Nathan's office. Words like fraud and abuse slipped into headlines. Nathan called me, his voice frantic. Dad, you're destroying everything. Do you understand? Investors are asking questions. Clara's furious. Stop before this ruins us all. The recorder in my pocket caught every syllable. I'm not ruining you, I said. I'm only telling the truth. If the truth ruins you, then maybe it should. People will think you're senile, he snapped. Clara's already talking to lawyers about your capacity. Capacity again? I cut him off. Funny how you keep reaching for that word when the money isn't where it should be. His breath caught, then the line went dead. The next day, Clara found me outside the grocery store. Her heels clicked sharp against the pavement. She smiled, but her eyes carried steel. You're making enemies you can't afford, she whispered. Nathan can survive this. You won't. No one will believe you against us. I stepped closer, low enough for only her to hear. I don't need belief. I have proof. For the first time since I had known her, Clara's face froze. Just like it had in the ballroom when she realized I'd seen the check. Weeks later, I stood in a courtroom where chandeliers had been replaced by fluorescent bulbs, and applause by silence. Patricia presented the evidence. The checks in Clara's maiden name, the shell companies tied to Nathan's office, the accountant's letter praising payments that never reached me, Joshua's testimony, Elena's sworn statement. The prosecutor laid it bare. Elder financial abuse, tax fraud, falsified trust accounts. Each count stacked like bricks on Nathan and Clara's shoulders. My son sat across the room in a suit finer than any I'd ever owned. But he didn't look like a titan. He looked small, cornered, the kind of man who had spent too long feeding on lies and now found the table empty. Clara's smile was gone altogether, her eyes fixed on the floor. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly. I gave my son everything I had. I worked nights, I skipped meals, I carried debts so he could carry dreams. And he used my name not to honor me but to build a lie. He told the world I lived in comfort while I scraped by on nothing. That's not just betrayal. That's theft. And I will not be silent anymore. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. Steadiness was the loudest sound in the room. The verdict came weeks later. Fraud confirmed. Accounts frozen. Properties seized. Clara's companies collapsed first, Nathan's reputation close behind. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I went home, boiled rice and beans, and sat at my kitchen table. The bills still lay there, but they no longer looked like death sentences. They looked like debts that could finally be paid with clean money. The phone buzzed with messages, strangers thanking me for speaking, for proving that silence can break. Some called me brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt awake. I opened my notebook, the same one that had once held only the word allowance. On the last page, I wrote 3 words I had repeated in the dark so many nights. We are not done. Because betrayal might end in court, but dignity begins again every morning a man decides to live visible.